I just wanted to compliment both the CRDA and the Chamber. This is a really brave thing that you guys have done. You know, at the end of the day, you're marketing organizations. You're here to promote the region, and it's pretty brave to put something out there that says, hey, here's where we're not doing as well as we should be. And I think now, having done this over the years, the thing that I've observed by doing this is you guys have the community really behind this whole thing. So I just wanted to lay that out there, compliment you guys on taking a shot at something that, you know, I know was a little bit of a nervous thing to begin with, but well done. So just to kind of kick it off, what I'm going to do, I'm going to refer us all to the pages here. So if you'll go to page 3, this is kind of the first question I had. And sort of a segue into what I was saying about how we're comparing ourselves to the other regions, and the whole idea is for us not to do well. You know, we're supposed to be pointing out with this type of a thing, hey, here's where we aren't doing well, and this question is about the comparative metros that we've got, and if we're starting to outperform these comparative metros, do we need new metros? Are you guys looking at sort of the next communities to go up against? Are we going to stay comparing ourselves to these guys for another round, or you know, I'm not asking are you going to do this next year, but are you beginning to sort of cast the net again, saying, okay, what is the sort of our new aspirational metros? Want to take it?
Thanks.
I didn't mean to. I thought I was throwing you a softball. I didn't know.
Right now, no, we're not looking at changing the communities that we compare against, although we are talking, especially with our higher ed research team, about Charleston's now globally competitive. And so, you know, one of the intriguing things for us is how do we measure ourselves against international communities? And the challenge with that is the data availability. So that's certainly something that we're discussing, but as long as we still have room behind Austin and Raleigh, there's still a gap there. So at this point, it's under discussion, but we haven't made any definite plans to change any of it yet.
Okay. Then I'm going to take you over to page 6. And the question is, you know, we've lost some ground on percentage of high school graduates and adults with college degrees. You know, you would think if people are moving here and all these industries that are coming in, that we would be at least maintaining or gaining. What's going on there?
Okay. Well, this actually could be just a fluke in terms of data itself, because it's census data. It's based on the American Community Survey, which is a sample survey. That's our data source. But it's also because of population gain. And, you know, we may be attracting folks with high skills in the community, but also folks with not high skills in the community. So all of that is a mix of just the growth that's taking place and the fact that, you know, it's one of our challenge areas. We've got to get more kids out of high school successfully, and we've got to get more folks into higher education in the community. So,
Grady, I think you've had a recent program on Trident County Cradle to Career, and obviously allowing the region to align its resources around looking at our K through 20 system is absolutely imperative. One of the things that we all talk about is each of these gauges is kind of like a treadmill. And I would love to tell you that you finally get well trained and fit with each gauge and you're finished. The reality today, when you talk to the employers in this room, and we've spoken to over 200 in the last 2 years, talent is still the #1 issue. So making sure we're firing on all cylinders and getting young people ready to go to school, successful kindergarten through graduation from high school, and then our undergraduate and graduate programs will always be an imperative for this region. So it's great to have this benchmark. We want to see it year in and year out and gauge how we're doing, because that treadmill is going to continue to elevate.
I'll just add that one of our other challenges here is that with college graduates, we've got a lot of college graduates coming out of the schools locally, but we need to retain them here. And we don't have all the job opportunities and the things that we talked about, the housing affordability, those kinds of issues. Folks are graduating from our schools here and they're moving to other communities where they can have the kind of lifestyle that they can afford. And so again, that all is part of this mix of how do we move this needle forward.
You've highlighted two issues, transportation and housing costs, and I wonder if there's some thinking or should be some thinking going forward around solutions that go beyond just more pavement or more houses way out. Things like the transformational impact that has been caused in Charlotte by the transit system going in, and whether if we could be thinking in terms of major investments in local infrastructure that goes beyond highways, we couldn't help to reshape the development of the city.
You know, I'll jump out there. It's a great point. I joined the Realtors Association, when was it, Ryan? A couple years ago now? 3 years ago? I can't remember. But we did a trip to Charlotte, to your very point, to learn about, and Michelle, you were with us, to learn about the light rail. I thought that was the solution, to your point, kind of looking beyond pavement and so on. What Michelle and Ryan, what we all took away from that day, the answer was everything. Everything had to be hitting on all cylinders, meaning you needed healthy expressways, you needed healthy bus routes, you needed, in their case, healthy light rail because they're a centric kind of community city, so they needed the hub and spoke to bring them into the city in the morning and go out in the afternoon. Ours is different, but it was all that. And I guess it surprised me. I thought they were going to claim that light rail was the answer. And it's simply not. So in our case, maybe light rail. I think there's a I-26 study being done that the COG is leading, but being implemented by Davis and Floyd, be finished by the end of the year. Somebody correct me if that's wrong, but the notion is thinking about all the opportunities to make I-26 healthier, and ultimately just recommend through an engineering and a full analysis what are the best solutions to make us healthy in this market, a comprehensive look. Then the question is getting all of us to agree to fund it, whatever those solutions are. So great point.
How about housing, David? Are you aware of any other initiatives that are, to sort of follow on to the second part of his question? Anything else going on to kind of help that housing?
Oh goodness, we've got the expert on the front row here, Michelle Mapp in the Low Country Housing Trust, so we can bring her up if you all.
Well, we can give Michelle I can give Michelle I can give her the microphone if you want.
If you want to get specific, you'll have some comments on housing affordability.
I think, Michelle and her group have helped educate us a lot over the last few years on some of the challenges we have in our local governments. Are working very hard now they understand that some of the zoning and regulations that we put in place years ago, that when you approve a development and every lot in the entire development is the same size, you're going to get every house in that development to be the same size too, because the builder's going to want the most they can get on each lot. And so what that does is it prevents us from having housing diversity. And our local governments recognize that, and they're doing things to change that. But we also have to look at opportunities for infill development, where there's already existing infrastructure. How can we develop there instead of continuing to go further and further out? So there's a lot that can be done locally, and we've, the Chamber and Michelle's group, we did a study several years ago, because people always say, well, we don't really have a housing affordability issue. It's, if you took out the peninsula and the resorts, housing's affordable in our community. Well, no, it's not. We looked at every zip code in our region, and there's a problem. Our wages are a problem, which is why the Alliance's goals are to increase wages in the community. We've got to bring sort of the standard of living up for our residents, and we also at the same time have to work on the regulatory side to make sure housing doesn't cost more than it should in the community. So it's a big challenge, and there are two-pronged approaches there. I mean, it's not one-size-fits-all answer.
Grady, we see how interconnected all of the opportunities and challenges are. When you look at the talent gauge, young people today, it's clear in the last 10 years, they're picking where they live before they choose where they go to work. We did a great community handprint study with Rebecca Ryan and looked at the 7 indices that attract young people and keep them in the community. One of the indices is they want to find an affordable place to live so they have additional money to do things in their spare time. If they come into our marketplace and all of their earnings are going toward their housing, they don't have the additional money to do things in their spare time. So part of bringing that housing price down and making us more attractive will drive our talent dividend up. So many of these things are so interconnected. If we're truly going to grow our talent, young people have to be able to come to this community and not have to find 2 roommates or be broke at the end of the month with regard to what they're paying for housing. So Michelle, Mary, we're doing a 10-year talent blueprint. Housing affordability is a top issue. We've got to get our arms around this. Mixed use. Mary's working with zoning folks now to look at what we can do to bring mixed use developments that have more affordable housing into our region. So it's a top issue right there with infrastructure.
I'm going to move us to page 8, and let's talk a little bit about that innovation index. And that's the one place where I think we're a little behind U.S. average. And just get you guys to speak into innovation index and what do we need to do to get that thing on the other side of the U.S.
Grady, I'll jump out because it reminds me, you hit on a couple things a minute ago about how this thing started 4 years ago. Just the scorecard assessment is tough. You all need to know in the audience, and we mentioned it to a couple groups last week when we were talking about this, a scorecard's tough because it exposes your weaknesses, right? And so if you're our board of directors and leaders in the community and you're saying, wait a minute, you're spending money and time and you're going to compare against other markets and you're going to expose our weaknesses relative to those markets? I mean, what's up with that? Why would you do that? Well, we didn't know exactly how the community would embrace it 4 years ago when we did it. I have to say, the first question at our board meeting 4 years ago was on the Innovative Activity Index, and it was from Ray Greenberg. You all know Ray. He's left our market, unfortunately, now. Sad for me. Left for was leading medical university, as you all know. Left for Texas to be a top leader in their whole state system. But he raised his hand. He said, David, got a question about the Innovative Index. And I said, oh my gosh, smartest guy in the room. I'm going to get creamed here for the data, or he's going to question why we did it, et cetera. But his question was a wonderful leading indicator about what we sense now for the last 4 years of you in the room. He said, listen, may I have 12 copies of this scorecard? Because I got a board of directors. I'd like to take copies to them and show them, listen, MedU and all of our innovation and medical technology, we've done a lot of good, but look at the improvement opportunity we have before us, right? Now, I didn't know which way he was going to go. I really didn't. He was a friend, he's a great leader, but I thought he could have gone the other way, and he didn't. And so for 4 years, you all, as a community and our leadership in this community, have embraced this notion of comparing ourselves, exposing our challenges, but also, as you saw from Mary and Steve, it shows our trend lines are very strong and very positive. So I share that little story with you just as insight. It is tough to do this kind of scorecard. It's not done very often in the country. Greenville does it in the upstate, but most places around the country can't figure out who to compare against, can't use money they wish they were marketing with to do it. And of course, the community leaders have to embrace that kind of notion. So those are my quick comments on innovation. I'll pass the baton.
Grady, this has been such a great job in developing the gauges. One of the things I'd want to encourage everybody to do, and this is a good one to look at it, if you go to the 6 data points on pages 8 and 9, really what's occurring with innovation becomes pretty clear very rapidly when you look at the metrics that were used for this gauge. If you look at employment and technical positions, while we are moving up, we have a positive green arrow, we still dramatically trail Austin and Raleigh and the percentage of employees that are in computer science and engineering occupations. If you drop down to venture capital, the true lifeblood of innovators, we've got a great distance to cover. You look at, Austin is 947, Raleigh is 633, we're 53.8. If you can't get the dough into the game with innovative entrepreneurs and opportunities, it's going to be a challenge. I'd like to congratulate Senator Paul Campbell and our legislature for passing the Angel Venture Capital Act, and that's going to allow more venture capital to come to our innovative team. If you drop down to, flip over to page 9, you look at science-related graduate students in 2010. We're only at 37.6. And then you look at a lot of our peer competitors. They are graduating more people in the STEM professions. The other thing we've learned about Raleigh and Austin is not only do they graduate them, they keep them in community. So right now we're working hard to look at the opportunity for a 4-year public research university in our region that would be able to graduate more young people in those fields. So I think when you really get behind the gauge, you can see what we need to do on the innovation gauge to be more successful. And I would encourage you, when you look at all the gauges, to go to the accompanying data, because our partners, along with Mary and Jackie, have done a great job isolating why we're not performing better or why we're performing very well. And in this one, the indicators are pretty clear and straightforward.
I'll just tag on again about Raleigh and Austin. We've looked really hard at those communities. University of Texas at Austin has 100,000 students right there in the city limits. If you actually expand that to University of Texas San Marcos, which I'd never heard of, they have 35,000 students. They're top 5 in supercomputing. That is a powerful basically force of people that comes out in waves every year. And Texas and Austin in particular are seen as a top destination because of the lifestyle assets, the cost of living, and everything else. Raleigh has 3 Tier 1 research universities. They have 25,000 graduates a year out of those combined. Again, top 10 engineering school. So as Bryan said, those are things that are kind of mission critical for us in that we have a rapidly expanding aerospace and aviation sector, but we don't produce any engineers here. We have a rapidly expanding IT sector and software sector, and we have a great program at the College of Charleston, but it needs to dramatically expand its capacity. And as we've talked about in terms of funding and everything else, there's some real strains on that ability. And those are the things that we are afraid of with this really strong growth we're having is actually going to be an anchor on us very, very shortly.
We've identified that out of the 100 top metros in the country, 87 of them have a major research university or major engineering school. So it's a huge gap for this region to remain competitive unless we fill that gap with a major research university in the degree programs. As Steve said, College of Charleston has great computer science area, and they're trying to expand it. But even with the current expansion that's been approved, it's nowhere near the capacity, going to meet our capacity needs that we have in this community. So this is one of the areas that we have really, we see a huge gap in this community in terms of competitiveness that we've got to fill.
Grady, just quick comment on Raleigh and Austin. You keep hearing us talk about them, and I've been here 20 years selling this community for business and talent and enjoying it very much, but people are very proud of Charleston. Say, why are we don't want to be like Austin and Raleigh and all that. Why do you keep comparing us to those places? A, they're 2.5 times our size, which is true. B, we're Charleston. We don't want to be like anybody else, right? Well, we're not trying to be like anybody. I think Steve and Mary said it well. We're trying to learn from these top performers in the country. Why and how are they performing at such a high level relative to some of these indicators? So I just add that notion, Grady, just to keep in mind so people don't think we're trying to be like anybody. We're just trying to learn from the best in the country.
Grady, I want to book in my partner here real quick. Why we may not want to be like them, what Mary just shared, we know our top 100 economic competitors. So what we have to assess is what resources and assets do we have to offer to our current employers in this room and those that we want to attract vis-a-vis our metro competitors. So when we have missing asset and resource priorities, like a four-year public research university, we know we need to get those into play. David and I just shared this presentation with our chamber board last week, and I said if I was going to lobby against Charleston for winning an aerospace supplier or an aerospace company or an IT company, the first thing I would point out is that there are not enough degree granting opportunities in this metro area. That's the reality of what we do up here. So why we don't want to be like them, we have to have the assets that allow us to compete against them.
And maybe this is a good segue into the other question I had written down. How about the talk of merger between College of Charleston and MUSC? Does this kind of knit something together that could help us here? What's your read on that? What's kind of give us the story on that?
I would say this innovation page, we want to deputize each one of you to be a lobbying assistant in assuring that those two institutions and our state legislature takes a very hard look at that. We're going to be we're currently not meeting the demand with engineering degrees and IT degrees, and that demand is going to increase as those clusters grow. It's almost an imperative for our future.
Any questions before I move to another page? Anybody want to?
Just to put it all in context, so of these 375 metros in the country, we're the 78th largest metro. And what Mary just said, 87 of the top 100 have Tier 1 research universities, which is kind of code for thinking about, to your point, combining things to be ultimately a Tier 1 research university, or an engineering university. And so, all right, we're 78th largest, so we're in the top 100 metros in our country. But you know our tourism data, right? I mean, we're ranked arguably in the top 10 on the tourism side. And when you look at Brookings and you look at Milken Institute, they're ranking our economic performance on the business side in the top 10. So we're a small community playing at a very high level. And talent, has already been said, and it's not a surprise to all of you, but as I travel around the world selling Charleston, talent is important to every industry and every company we meet with. It is the issue. And you say, well, hadn't it always been? Well, yeah, it's been in the top 5 or 10, but it hadn't always been the top issue. Not since I've been selling Charleston for 20 years. It was in the top 5, but it might have been infrastructure or near something or near MedU or near the port or on rail or big site or available building or, any of those might have trumped labor cost, labor availability. Not today. Every company, every industry. So we got to get this right. It's probably the best question of the day is how to improve our talent pipeline for the future of Charleston.
And the other thing we see, Grady, right next door to talent, 1A and 1B, is highway accessibility. Every site selection consultant, every moving company is going to say, how do I get my employees to and from work in a timely manner? How do I get my products in and out in a timely manner? So if we were going to have 1A and 1B, they're captured in this report, and they're truly a part of what we need to be able to do to maintain and grow the employment base.
That's the question I get. They say, and I think Mary alluded to it, and I have been saying it lately because I've concluded as through my travels to Japan and France and the west coast of our country and the Northeast just in the last 6 months, CEOs around the world are telling me and confirming, actually affirming to me that these data points and these accolades that we're all reading about locally, we're not drinking our own Kool-Aid. They're actually real in the minds of executives around the world. But the kicker comes next. What they say after they affirm, and I'm feeling pretty good and ready to go to dinner with them or whatever, then they say, but David, can you and your community sustain that? Can you sustain the education and the transportation and infrastructure networks to sustain where you are 10, 20 years out? Isn't that interesting? I mean, so, feel good for a moment, But the challenge for all of us is, can we sustain it? And that's what we're really here to talk about today.
1 million people is not a small metro area any longer. And million is what we're facing. It's coming right at us, and there's no stopping it. So we've got to think differently and act differently, and we've got to tackle these issues to be able to sustain that economic growth that we all want. We want it for our children and our grandchildren. I mean, no community doesn't want economic growth. We've got to manage it well, but we've got to tackle these problems, and we've got to do it faster than we've ever done it before.
So to put that in context, so Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester counties, our metro, the true metro region, is about 700,000 people today. So Mary's estimating we'll be at 1 million in 15 years, but quietly she will tell you probably a little less based on the numbers and the, growing population-wise at 3 times the national average in the last few years. I mean, this stuff is happening. So this isn't a scare tactic. Actually, this is a good thing. It just means people around our country and world are moving here intentionally. Some for jobs, some are moving here hoping for a job. Yeah. But we need to prepare for it.
Just real quickly, I know we're taking longer on the questions, but it's cool stuff. You want to get inside the mind of a COO of an international company, and we were with one about 8 months ago, and our question was, why Charleston? Why did you pick here? And he said the 2 things we look at that anybody on an international stage looks at are very simple. They're speed to implementation and speed to market. If I can quickly find the right talent, the right manufacturing processes, and assure that I can build that product and get it out to the market quickly, I'm going to have a shot at success. All this stuff impacts speed to implementation and speed to market. And that's what that leading edge international company, and we've got a lot of them now. Mary and Steve and David are right. They're coming here, and those are their expectations. So along with the population growth, that new requirement for us to continue to rank like this is very, very important to fulfill.
All right, here's a question.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I have a small business, Cast Web Design and Marketing. I just wanted to ask a question. I find this discussion extremely interesting, and I wanted to thank you because the mention of talking about the research university is a good point, and that we need more support from local government. My question as well is, in terms of our local culture, is there a resistance to change? Is that what's limiting us, given if we had the universities, given if we had the funding? Is that a factor? Because I found mention of that in the community. So I'm just curious on your point of view.
Are you asking if we care about our history and heritage here for 300 plus years? Is that the question? Just want to make sure I understood the question.
I'll take a stab at it. I think it's a great question because I have the benefit, as Mary does, of being in this kind of work for the last 20 years, in her case, plus actually 25. So I think we might be able to address it a little bit. The best way I can say it is through a short anecdote. This summer, my family, my wife and I took our 12 and 14-year-olds to Normandy, to the beaches of France, to see the history and the natural beauty and all that. But oddly, while we were there, we saw a billboard of all things, all right, on the Normandy coast of France, right on the English Channel. The billboard was a big picture of sunglasses, and one lens had a black and white picture that was clearly of World War II vintage, right? The Army guys at war. And the other lens was a bright colored picture, and I don't remember the actual dimension, but it was clearly a modern picture. And the notion at the bottom was, please visit the World War II Memorial in Caen and, experience our history and the future of France or whatever. And I tell you that brief story because it made me think of your question, made me think of Charleston, that I think what we are doing and need to do into the future is not forget history, certainly, and not forget many of you in this room that have been working at selling and improving this community for 20, 30, 40 years, but we have to look forward and we have to be progressive, not only embracing all kinds of people and cultures, but embracing the future, not being scared by it. So that may sound a little high level, but it struck me very personally that lens of keeping a foot strongly in both places is where Charleston is today and needs to be going forward. So you might need to add to that, but that's
I think that's well said. The growth that's occurring here, there are lots of new people moving to the community, and that brings change, and they come with different attitudes, and they haven't embraced that history that we've had for 300 and something years. But at the same time, it's one of the reasons that people do come here to visit is because of that history. So we've got to preserve it and maintain that sort of reverence to it. But you look at the economy of our region, it has fundamentally changed in the last 5 or 6 years. We are not the same economy that we were. We've got high-tech, high-skilled, high-growth jobs occurring here. And so that makes us a different place than we've been before. And so we have to change and adapt and meet the needs that those jobs that are being created here and are going to continue to be created are going to demand, again, if we're going to succeed in economic growth. So I hope we add to that.
Sorry,
Brian.
I think another way to look at that is when we go to these aspirational communities. We went to Nashville, Tennessee with 60 leaders last year. We're getting ready to go to San Antonio, Texas next week. One of the things you find in aspirational communities that are meeting their expectations is an abundance mentality. I think we were struck again and again when we were in Nashville, whether it was talking about how entrepreneurs are taken care of or looking at 40 mayors coming together to advance the region. There was an abundance mentality, not a scarcity mentality. So how do we as a region say, what are the things that we want to honor and uphold, but also have an abundance mentality about moving forward? And Mary's warning about how quickly we're growing. Somebody keeps saying, we hear a lot of people, growth is going to really catch us. It's going to happen. We're in the middle of it. A fish doesn't know it's wet. We're in the middle of growth. So how do we have an abundance mentality that allows us to take advantage of the opportunities while honoring the things that are most important? And that's a big mind shift. You talk about the scarcity that's happened around funding infrastructure and public university system. Texas is making a big push right now to heavily fund all their second-tier public universities. They know A&M and University of Texas are in great shape. They're investing with an abundance mentality in their future talent. So I think that's the biggest shift. Do we want to be on the stage, and can we think with an abundance mentality?
I'll add one more quick anecdote, Grady. We were on a call yesterday with a gentleman named Robert Tursick, who's an international consultant on innovation. The guy he lives in seat 1A on an airplane, basically. He was off to Barcelona and 5 other places after our call. And he travels the world and he looks at change and innovation. And we were briefing him because he's coming in to speak to our annual luncheon. So brief commercial for that, November 6th.
Nice.
But you like that? Yeah. But he made an interesting comment, and it kind of tracks with what we've been talking about. And he said, in looking at communities, we were basically saying we're kind of at an inflection point. We're at a place of success that we haven't been in a long time. It's pretty unique in our community's history. But we have some challenges that we've been talking about today. And he said, well, it's interesting. He said, what I see in traveling and looking at these communities all over the world is that there's really kind of 2 ways you can go. And he said, in some communities choose to optimize to the past, and some choose to optimize to the future. And that was the way he summed it up, which I think was just kind of an interesting way to look at it, to say, because I don't think, nobody in economic development or community development or workforce development, nobody wants to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. This is a phenomenal place to live. It is incredible quality of life. Nobody wants to kill that. But we also don't want to let that get killed just because we sit back and hope everything will go well for our future.
We're getting close to having to wrap this up, and I'm just going to end with sort of a kind of a visioning style question. If you the slide that we've got up on the screen there, and also refer you guys page 15 is the key takeaways. The last thing, and we'll just kind of close with that talent question. it's implement an aggressive and sustained talent attraction and retention strategies. Can you guys speak into, what is an aggressive strategy? I mean, what more could we do? I'm struggle with that as a small business owner. I mean, we have empty chairs. We're always working understaffed. I can't find people. I think everybody in the room is dealing with that, and I don't know how more aggressive I could possibly be as a business. But as a community, what's aggressive? Like a vision thing. It's not something we're going to do tomorrow, but what should we do? Giant billboards in the sky or what?
Yes.
Skywriting.
Grady, we've talked about a lot of the things here. We've talked about a talent pipeline, essentially building out that K through 20 where we've got to produce more of the kind of talent we need. And we've also talked about the retention strategies. And Bryan mentioned the talent handprint that Rebecca Ryan did that was led by the Metro Chamber. And it essentially addressed what we would call product improvements. Here are the things that you need to do in your community. And it was also a benchmark study against other communities that we know we compete with for talent. So it was Raleigh and Atlanta and Austin and communities like that. So there's some definite kind of strategic framework laid out to, and a lot of it is the things we talked about today, multimodal transportation. Young talent doesn't want to live an hour's commute away by car. They want more density in housing. They want more options. They want to be able to ride a bicycle or light rail or carpool or express bus. So we've talked about a lot of those things. The thing that we're not doing here as a community, and we're actually in the process of crafting a strategy as we speak, is an aggressive recruitment strategy. And so this is not a new thing. Other communities around the country have been looking at it. I was looking at some studies that go back to 2009, 2010, that aggressive communities are actually going to other geographies that have a depth of talent that are needed for our specific sectors, and we've talked about information technology, aerospace, aviation, engineering, and are actually recruiting people to come to our community. But it's all got to be done at the same time. We can't recruit somebody and say, it's a great place to live if you have a boatload of money and can live, downtown. Or if you don't mind sitting in a car for 3 hours, and having relocated here from Atlanta about 8 years ago, I can tell you that there's a bunch of people that don't want to spend 3 hours or 4 hours of their day in a car. And so we've got to do all these things in concert to be able to aggressively be able to not only produce but also attract the talent we need.
If you look at the slide on the screen, it's what we need to do. The issue now that we're talking with David, Steve, our board, their board, other leaders we're going to tap is how we do it. This is not dramatically different from what the top change priorities were 1 year ago. But 1 year has passed. While there has been progress, the reality is we have to take stock of our current assets and plus them to the degree that we can. And that's why we're looking at things like an R1 merger between those two schools, why we're assessing our infrastructure. But also I think we need strategies that will help us accelerate what we're doing. We're going to look at places like Denver and Los Angeles and other places that have found different funding sources for their infrastructure improvements. We've had a gasoline tax that hasn't been increased in this state 27 years. Doesn't seem the state legislature has the appetite to do that. So how do we find ways locally? Maybe the state legislature would allow our region to have control over increasing the gasoline tax. There has to be revenues associated with the investments required to do what's in front of us. We can't wait for Columbia. We can't wait for Washington, D.C. We're going to have to grapple with some of these things on our own and bring the right leaders together that want to drive the community forward to have success. Otherwise, we're going to be caught up in inertia, and these things are going to gobble us up in the years ahead.
That's well said. I would just add a little context and framework to your question, Grady. It's a great question about talent recruitment, or what does that mean? And the context I would offer to the group is to think of talent in three kind of groups. So the first piece is the education piece, right? K through all the way college, graduate school, and we are working on that in a lot of ways. The Cradle to Career Collaborative, that was a great panel that Michelle was on, and last month. and a lot of other efforts. The second piece is getting the community ready for talent, meaning everything from bike lanes to parks to a more inviting environment. I was just talking to Eric about how wonderful the Mount Pleasant landscaping is. It's very inviting. That makes people enjoy the place. It's an attractive place for talent. So that's a whole, very complex dynamic of getting the product ready. Then the third piece is what Steve was talking about, is recruiting talent. And it is a new thing here, because you're going, well, hey, I got a lot of friends that don't have a job or wish they had a better job. And so why would you recruit people on top of that? Well, it would be aligned with the requirements, like Steve said. The industries require some things we don't have. So they're going to have to go outside. An anecdote is from a technology executive said, hey, 2 points here, Dave. Good news is, cool city, port, quality of life, cool atmosphere, history. I can recruit top technology talent. So that's a good thing. And I am doing it, and I'm growing my company like crazy. The challenge is it's more expensive to do that than hire locally. And so long term, I want to be able to recruit some, but I need those colleges pumping out more technology folks that, will fit. So that's the dynamic. I would just encourage people to think of that 3-group framework as we move forward into a kind of a talent recruitment world.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up. It's also my job to get all these people to work on time, because we've got a gross regional product to take care of now. So, just to close with, if you can't measure it, you can't fix it. And so I really I want everyone to join me in applauding this group for putting this out there and taking this time.
Thank you.